Welcome to the Ave Podcast with Cal C on South Shore Ave Radio.
Welcome to the Ave Podcast. So just before we begin this, my episode on Joel, Ja, Jimmy, and Jokic, I do want to express one thing really quickly without getting into too much of his business, but the podcast has been a little sporadic the last couple of weeks or so, without airing out all the details. Kind of going through a family situation right now, so just trying to get that resolved, or in the midst of trying to get that resolved. The podcast has been a little sporadic. I'm still kind of going through it right now. I'm hoping by the finals it'll kind of be, putting out regular episodes as normal. And there will be more interviews. Everything's kind of been put on hold for a little bit while I get this stuff resolved. But I just want to share that with you. So I do apologize that the episodes, especially during the playoffs for the basketball fans that haven't been, hasn't been coming out as much. That is the reason for it. So I'm hoping that, I will have at least a little bit more. I would say by the finals, I should probably be back up and running. But I do want to share at least a few thoughts because so many things has been happening, during that, my last episode, especially regarding, the Spurs winning the number one pick. I mean, who couldn't see that one coming? And they're going to get Wembanyama, Portland getting the number 3 pick. And you're hearing all the rumors of Toronto, hopefully being in the mix for that third seed. I would love for us to get Lillard, but it seems like we may be getting a Scoot instead, which, possibly, which, if that trade goes through. And, I'm okay with the rebuild, especially in light of the last podcast. I'm not mad at the definite retool, and getting younger players and possibly getting a star, or a superstar that can grow with us for the next 5 to 8 to 9 years or so, depending on how long you can hold on to that contract. So I'm okay with all of it in that aspect. But I mean, there's so much been going on the last couple of weeks since we aired. So that, I feel like I have to jump in and share at least a few minutes at least. So I will say that I should be back. At least I should have at least a episode next week. But if not, it'll definitely be the week after. Please just keep checking the feeds. Check the website for any updates in terms of episodes, wherever you listen to podcasts, continue to check that as well. So, I appreciate your patience with me during this process, man. I thank you. During the last 2 weeks, I've been looking at everything here, and there's been, many central characters throughout the playoffs, as there always is, right, in any sport. But for me specifically, there's been, I would say, 4 central players for me that I want to focus on as storylines, within the last month or so, especially since this playoff started. And, the other day I was, I forgot one of the movie channels I was watching, but I was watching Boys in the Hood, right? And this is John Singleton was a director, rest in peace to him. He's done great content over the years, put out great work. I spent about 5 or 6 episodes on a snow capping series that you can go back and double back on if you haven't watched the last season of Snowfall. That was his baby. It works within the same vein of everything that he started from, which was Boys in the Hood. And, I remember watching that movie when it came out when I was younger, and you really felt for the characters of the movie, Doughboy, Trey, everything that, Trey's dad was teaching him. And as an athlete, especially back in them times when, you're having your dreams of playing basketball and everything else, you gravitated towards Ricky because Ricky wanted what we all wanted at that time, a scholarship, right? And watching him run down the alleyway with the shooter that guns him down with the rifle in his back, most athletes during that time, felt that, you know what I mean? Because it's like, man, this guy just lost a scholarship. We know this is a movie, but we all usually gravitated towards that. Who would think that an athlete watching that movie will gravitate towards a shooter? And I say this because, I guess it's a segue, I should say, towards Ja Morant. But, I'm not saying Ja Morant's a shooter or anything, but who would think that, he's watching that movie and he's more gravitating towards the guy with the rifle in his hand? Go figure, right? And I don't know, making a joke here, but I mean, with Ja, and I mean, I have to mention this. Like, there isn't much to really say that's already hasn't been said many times. You know, this story's been beaten to death in the last, few days or so since the weekend, since it's come out. And, even when the first time it's happened, I didn't have much to say because it was obviously so stupid. The first time, to beat it over the head as a podcaster and a media type, just to me, it just made no sense at that point. It was a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer in terms of what he did wrong. It almost made no sense for me to deep dive into it anyway. I did mention this in an earlier podcast. I think it was the State of the Raptors address when this initially happened. We definitely got into that a little bit. When you combine all that with all the incidents from the summer in terms of, getting to that fight with the kid and, allegedly flashing the gun, for running up on the finish line to defend his mama with 8 or 9 people with him, to running up at his sister's volleyball game with a crew with them and breaking phones and intimidating people. Okay, fine. Serve the suspension. Just be contrite. Don't do it again. And just keep this moving. And the whole I'm going to get counseling and you're cured after 4 days, we all agree that was total bullshit. We know that. Because obviously it's super duper rare for that to click in that fast if you're serious about counseling. Normally that takes weeks, at minimum. And I understood. It's the business of basketball. You can't afford to have him miss the whole season. I don't think people would have been mad if he did. But I get it. The business of basketball between team and player, one of your biggest stars is going to be just randomly removed out the rest of the season. That hurts business. I get it. So for this to happen a second time in a row, I mean, it reeks of two things among so many other things, but it reeks of two things for me: immaturity and mental health. And this is the problem that I have within this social media era. And I'm not even putting this on the younger generation because, believe me, I can show you many people my age or older that are just as hooked on social media as the younger generation, that are very addicted to it as well. It's just the need to post everything for validation that I could just, even when I started even getting into social media, I could just never understand. Believe me, I understand the importance of it, where we are now with life. But for someone like Ja, who's in the position that he's in, the need for validation for him isn't that needed for him, really, truly, because those videos coming out, the one where he's in the club, the latest one on over the weekend, and the Instagram lives, not even a video, but the Instagram lives, how does that help his brand? If he's trying to be a billionaire, his words, not mine, his words. How many of those billionaires do you know that are peddling tools for everyone to see that's not skeet shooting or hunting? I don't mean the old billionaires. I mean even like the younger guys as well. And even then, even if they are hunting and big game hunting and skeet shooting, we don't see it on camera. We don't see this on lives. The only billionaire that we know who was peddling tools was Jay-Z. And that's because he told us in his raps. He never showed us. And even when Jay became Jay, you think he was doing that? He had and probably still has security or a team that's around him constantly that you can't come nowhere near touching him. And if he wasn't pulling it out and flashing it on people back then for people to see or talk about and take pictures, what makes you think he's doing that in his 50s? I think this whole thing isn't just one thing, of course. It's a clusterfuck of so many other things. But it definitely reeks of the scent of those two. And we know the suspension is going to be lengthy and is coming and is warranted. And not just because of the laws that's been broken, because no laws have been broken in this sense. He's in a carry-free state in Tennessee, so you can't have a gun without a permit, in that state that he's in. But the NBA also has its own constitution between players and teams that, deem conduct detrimental to just not only the franchise and the league is going to get you punished. And listen, Adam Silver is not David Stern. Stern would have nailed his ass to the wall the first time and practically dared him to do it a second time. Silver is not like that at all. He's been a player's commish the last 9 years or so that he's been in this role. But you're now forcing him to be more like Stern. So he's in this position where he has to come down hard. The whole thing is dumb. It's sad. the NBA is trying to give players like Ja the league. And we all think the transaction is seamless until you find out that person that's on the receiving end isn't equipped to handle it. No matter what the social settings that he comes from. It's sad, but he is 23. He can fix it, but it's going to take him a long while to get back to where he is now. And the only way that he's going to do that is if he lays low and if he does a cleanup around him, like a full cleanup. I mean, you can't put it on his parents. He's 23 years old. He's a 23-year-old multi-millionaire. And when that economic dynamic flips in the family, yeah, they're still your parents, for sure. They'll always be your parents. But they haven't been in your position before. I mean, I think for him, if it's not going to be his parents, he definitely has to find somebody to listen to, and fast. I'm thinking even if you call an OG like Zach Randolph, who came from the streets and had a rough setting in the beginning of his career to ended up being a pillar not just of the Memphis community, but for that franchise. Like, I don't know if he's had his number retired, but it will be, and it should be. He was a great figure for that community and that franchise once he got there. He's got to fix this just basically because they're going to be coming for that contract the third time. And you probably want to start with the homie that's always been there for every incident that seems to be getting you in trouble. I forget the guy's name, but pretty much every incident that's happened, from the lives to all the incidents this summer, this guy was right there. So clearly it's one of your tight homies that, he's not afraid to get it popping. So you might want to either get rid of him or he needs to be in those counseling sessions with you. Anyways, enough about that because I want to focus on another J here. And I've said this over and over again about my 4 favorite players in the league. And all of them have disappointed for different reasons. Curry, Kawhi, and Giannis. But I may have to suspend my 4th off my list entirely until further notice. And it hurts me because I've defended him his whole career, man. I've mainly rode for him, especially the last 2 years in the regular season at least. And this year, he spoke up. He spoke up about winning this award, the MVP award, and he became more vocal about it. And he made the media rounds about championing for that new Michael Jordan trophy, which represents the MVP award. And God bless him. Between that and the spin turning on Jokic to win the third, I include myself in that. Joel walked away with the MVP, and it was deserved. And you could tell it meant a lot to him because, you saw him broke down once it was announced that he won it. He broke down again during, the presentation in front of the Philly fans, especially when his son came out. Beautiful moments, great moments. You appreciate that. Everybody wants their athletes to play it cool, but I like them to be human sometimes, man. And seeing him break down like that during that moment, I mean, this means a lot to players. It's life-changing. It's great, right? Especially when you hear the story about how we even discovered the sport in the first place. It's actually amazing. But the difference between him and those 3 guys is that they learned to be dominant during the playoffs. And whether it was injuries or him just staying in some kind of shape, he never takes over when the team needs him the most. And there's usually a reason. And if he was hurt and we find out that it was a bigger tear in his knee than initially reported, then okay. But man, watching Game 4 and Game 6 of that Boston series, it deeply disturbed me as a basketball fan. And for somebody that's been riding with Joel the longest on his bandwagon, defensively he was pretty much there, but at times he looked timid and getting blocked by Horford multiple times. Especially in Game 4 when P.J. Tucker got that and one and had to basically made a beeline for Embiid and just yelled at him to motivate him. And let's face it, James Harden saving his ass during Game 4, he would have been crucified had they lost that game. Stats be damned because we look at the stats and you're like, well, what are you complaining about? But if you saw the game, you know what I'm talking about. But then Game 5. And I missed Game 5 due to the same family situation that I'm speaking about. So I missed pretty much all of Game 5. But, you realize, okay, he put the smack down now. And now Boston is down 3-2. And you're going back to Philly. You're the MVP. This is a big moment now. Big moment now. This is for you to, put that, for him to put that smack down in Game 6. Philly's going off to the conference finals where they're going to be hosting. They're going to have the home court advantage. You got this MVP. Like, this is what it's about. Like, this is what the moment is about. And Game 6, he did it again. He repeated the Game 4 performance. And this time, Harden joined him. And because of that, I think that energy basically carried over to Game 7. It ended up costing Doc Rivers his job. They ended up getting the blame in terms of Harden and Embiid coming up short. And it's all warranted. It's all warranted. Listen, I mean, regarding Doc Rivers and all those losing Game 7s and coughing up all those series where he's up 3-1 or 3-2 in the series, that's a podcast in itself. Maybe we'll touch on that another time. I mean, think about it. Even the title that he won with Boston in 2008, it took 26 out of the 28 games for them to achieve that. They went 16-10, I believe, which is almost the maximum of playoff games that you can play in, including going 7 games in round 1 against a 37-win Hawks team, which made no sense at the time. But forgetting all that for a moment, at some point, you know, when you're the best player, when you're the quote-unquote best player in the game, you have to at some point put the smack down throughout the playoffs, whether it's a whole playoffs or multiple series at least. It's the fingerprints of a truly great player, and he's never done it, not one time. The last 4 MVPs didn't make it to the conference finals, right? But Giannis, at least since he won his last MVP, at least won a chip and laid the smackdown. And Jokic is doing it now. You know, Embiid has never had that stretch. He just wrapped up his 9th season. And you got to wonder, with all this time that he's been in the league now, is that playoff switch ever going to flip for him? You know, is it just simply him getting into better shape? Is it just unlucky? Or does he just not get it? I'm not saying I am completely off the bandwagon, but I've definitely stood up, I've rung the bell, and I'm walking to the steps. I've basically given up most of my hope right now, if not all of it. You know, and the last 2 years, think about it. The last 2 years, when you compare regular season stats and playoff stats, and I know I'm just focusing on one particular stat, but it kind of tells the story. You know, regular season, he's averaged in the last 2 years, respectively, 30 points and 33 points a game, leading the league both years in scoring. When you contrast that with his last 2 playoff seasons, he's averaged 23 points a game in both. It kind of tells a story, you know, and I just don't see that urgency from him right now. You know, I don't see it. But 4 years ago, he had a teammate that showed that consistency, you know, that urgency, that dog, and he was cool with being that number 2 guy. And that guy was Ben Simmons. And, okay, I'm joking. Philly's long-term success was forever changed when they didn't sign Jimmy Butler and, you know, they didn't keep him in the building. And they were so enamored with Ben and keeping him beside Joel that I feel like it's costing them now. You know, because even then I was saying years back that the perfect team for Jimmy Butler, you know, if you remember all the situation that he was going through with in Minnesota and how he came into Philly and, you know, he was barking up. I thought that the perfect team is the team that he's at now, which is Miami. But I think in some ways Joel needed Jimmy more than Ben. And we've seen how that's played out, of course, because we all have this revisionist history app that we continually tune into, you know, when it comes to these things. But what would Joel look like now if Himmy was beside him? We're not even having this conversation about his sense of urgency. You know, whether you win or lose, that's one thing. But when you come in with it every night, we can't question that. We would not even be having this conversation if Jimmy was still on the team. And look, I've always liked Jimmy, but I never thought he was a superstar. And the last 2 years for me, I have to give it, I got to give him his rose petals, you know, complete with the Coming to America theme music. Because even when he was going off in the bubble, I wasn't fully convinced, but I love players who play better and harder in the playoffs in all sports. So how could I not love and respect what he's doing right now? The last 2 years during the regular season, he averaged 21 and 23 points respectively on average. In the playoffs, it's 27.4 last year and 31.5 this year. Even during game 1 of the conference finals, he set the tone on both ends of the floor. And the team basically is mirroring its leader, right? Like Jimmy has set the blueprint, and the team has been tracing that blueprint this whole playoffs. Like, look at last night. 35 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, 6 steals. 6 steals? 6 steals? And then you had 4 players on top of that all get 15 points each. Look, while I still think Boston is going to win the series, I'm not willing to write that in ink. I'm only going to put that in pencil. Everything at this point is out the window going forward, especially when you consider the coaching matchup between Spoelstra and Mazzulla. If the Heat pull this off, man, and they end up winning the finals or even getting to the finals, I mean, it goes without saying it's the most unexpected thing we will have ever seen in this sport. That includes the 99 Knicks, who was also an 8 seed, because, number one, that was a 50-game season. Had they played all 82 games, I'm willing to bet, I'm almost positive New York would not have stayed at that 8th spot. And even that Rockets team winning it all back in 95 as a 6 seed and beating 4 50-win teams on their way to repeating, at least they were the defending champions that kind of fell apart and, found its footing towards the end of the season. And look, this team itself, Miami was just in the conference finals a year ago, and they were within a failed 3-point attempt from Jimmy at the end of Game 7 to making it to the finals themselves. So the remnants of that squad is still there, but, man, they truly struggled all season long, like to the point where they couldn't even beat the Hawks in the play-in. So look, you also have to be lucky to get on a run like this, and not having Giannis to play against, for the first 3 games of that first round plays into it too. But, still, regardless of that fact, it goes without saying this is beyond impressive. He's really driving this train right now. It's incredible to watch as a fan. And I don't know what's in that water in South Florida right now. Was that extra flooding in Fort Lauderdale last month? Did it provide some sort of special serum that this team drank out of that now allowed the Heat and as well as the 8th-seeded Florida Panthers to even be in the conference finals? I got no idea. I have no idea. But it's unprecedented for something like that to be happening at the same time in the same city. It's mystifying. And last but not least, Nikola Jokic, the Joker. And don't get me wrong, I love Jokic. But part of the reason why I was so mad at Embiid was because, especially after Game 4, I'm watching his performance in Game 4. Game 4 and Game 6, sorry. And I'm countering that with Jokic, who played the same night. And I'm watching Joker just go ape shit on Phoenix. And it wasn't just the stats. It was just the effort. It was the urgency that he played with. The sense of the moment of just knowing that he has to wipe this team out. So that energy, the team followed. Like his last 5 games, the last 5 games, I want to make sure I read this correctly. He had 30 points, 17 assists, 17 rebounds, 53 points, 11 assists, 4 boards, a 29, 13 and 12 triple-double, followed by a 32, 10 and 12 triple-double, followed by a 34, 21, 14 triple-double in Game 1 of the conference finals. I mean, that says everything in terms of urgency, sense of the moment. It jumps off the screen when you watch him play. Right now, during the playoffs, he's averaging 31, 13 and a half boards and 10 assists. He's averaging a triple-double, like a dominant triple-double this whole playoff so far, and it doesn't seem like this train is slowing down. There's very few places you can make him uncomfortable. He has the gaudy stats, but he doesn't exactly need it to win. You know what I mean? It's crazy to see where it's like as a superstar, especially those moments like a Shaq, for example, like you were running that ball through Shaq. Shaq needed the ball. Shaq was getting 35 to 40 points, especially when it got closer and closer to the finals. But what somebody like Joker, like if Joker has 14, 15, and 8 and the team wins by 20, he's good. The team runs through him, but not in that Luka Doncic sort of way. Like he's fine with the hockey assists. He moves through that energy. He's good with that, but he can still dominate the game. And his team is deep. They're hungry. It just feels like it's their time. And yes, they got to watch out for the Lakers because the Lakers are playing great. They're cohesive right now on all aspects, and they're very well coached, which I think is very underrated. Like Darvin Ham is doing a great job. Nobody's talking about that enough. He's doing a great job this playoffs, especially once those trades went through. But this playoffs especially, he's been doing an amazing job. But it feels like Joker is ready to do this. Like think about it. The last 2 MVP seasons, he was missing his 2 best players, And some of that voting was not just on his great play, but based on look at how he's carrying these guys, the team that he has left with him, and look what he's doing with everything that he's got. And that's part of the charm of winning those 2 MVPs. It's kind of like when Nash won in 05 and 06, and Stoudemire wasn't there, and everybody thought they were going to fall back, and he had an even better season. He had like a number 1-2 seed, and even though I thought Kobe should have won that MVP because he was averaging like 35 a game or something like that, you understood at least that what Nash was doing was amazing as well, right? And now you're seeing what this guy can do with a fully healthy team in the playoffs. And don't get this twisted. He made a conference finals before, like, in the bubble, but at least he's not the same player in the bubble as he is now. This guy's way more dominant. He's got that weird, unorthodox flailing style with a beautiful touch that just works. And as big as he is, he's faster than you think. His footwork is better than you think. And he's all-seeing, especially at that size. And when you're all-seeing on a creative side at that size, it's scary where you can go. For the casuals out there, I don't know if you've seen, I'm a father of 2. So I've seen Kung Fu Panda a lot, especially that first one. And watching Joker this whole playoffs, or even in this series, and we don't know how this series is going to turn out. I think Denver's going to win this series, though. But when you watch Kung Fu Panda and they let the tiger out, and the tiger finally meets up on Kung Fu Panda, he's trying to get the scroll that's going to make him this completely legendary villain. And he's looking at Kung Fu Panda and he's like, "You're the guy? You're a panda. You're a fat panda." That's how I feel like most casuals are looking at this. Like, how is this guy dominating LeBron and AD, at least in game 1? Like, how can they not stop this guy? But to me, he's the Kung Fu Panda right now. I'm not saying he's fat, but you look at his body, you're looking at it and you're just saying to yourself, there's no way this guy can barely jump over a phone book. How is this guy destroying the league like this, especially the playoffs like this? And, it always speaks to, the aspect of fundamentals, right? This is where, for years I used to always argue with people about athleticism versus skill set. And I always said I would always, as long as I watch basketball, as long as I watch sports, I will always take skill set and fundamentals over athleticism any day of the week, because that carries you further than your athleticism. And we're seeing it right now, right? You put that with heart, with urgency, with effort, there's no telling how far you can go, right? And I'm not saying you can be a superstar, because he's truly unique, but fundamentals in any aspect of life will take you further than your athletic gifts or your talent, right? Like, when you combine the fundamentals and you master the craft of what it is you're trying to do, now you put that with talent, it's over. So who cares? And in the game of basketball or in sports, even if you're not the most athletic, that doesn't matter, because if you mastered everything else, who can stop you? Nobody knows where you're going to go but you. That's all you need to know, right? So like I said again, I think Denver is going to win this series. I still think it's Denver and Boston going to be in the NBA Finals. We'll see what happens there, but this series both series actually is going to be really fun to watch. But I'm interested to see where Joker takes this, because like I said, the last 2 MVPs, he took a lot of flack this season, and I'll throw myself in there. He took a lot of flack this season about, possibly winning a third, and I think this is how you shut everybody up. If you're walking away with the Larry O'Brien at the end of the day in the Finals MVP, it's that Kanye West song over and over again. You can't tell me nothing, right? That's where we go from here. So, I'm going to wrap up for now. Thank you for listening to this podcast as always. I appreciate you guys for tuning in as always. Make sure you check out and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to the podcast, especially on southshirav.com. Hit me with those 5 stars. I need those 5 stars no matter what's happening. I need the 5 stars. Click on it, please. It drives the future of the show. I appreciate you guys. There's going to be more interviews and more episodes coming down the pipeline, I promise you. But like I said, if I'm not back next week, due to this situation that I'm dealing with right now, I will be back the following week for sure. But I should be back with at least a short episode at the very least next week, talking about the rest of the NBA Finals or anything that may pop up that, we can't avoid and we got to discuss. All right, so I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Once again, my name is Cal C, and you just tuned into the Ave Podcast right here on South Shore Ave Radio. All right, until the next one, we out.